What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2020 Honda Civic Si Coupe. Huge thanks to Honda for providing me here with the Si Coupe to review for you guys today. So about the coupe version of the Si, well, I already reviewed the sedan version last fall and I was very impressed with the changes here for 2020. But for the coupe here, I'm just appreciative that the coupe still exists because aside from the Veloster Turbo, this is the only other coupe really in this segment. Everything else, all the competitors are four-door sedans, and of course you do have that four-door sedan option here for the Si, but I like that they've kept the coupe around. Even though they probably don't sell a ton of them, I think that it's great. It's just kind of an old school kind of feeling to have a front wheel drive, hot performance little coupe like this. It's something you used to see tons of those back in the 90s and 2000s, and now they're pretty rare. But anyway, as far as the Si's changes here for 2020, you got some nice upgrades here on the outside. You can see first off, you have these new standard LED headlamps and also LED fog lights. Those are great inclusions, give you better nighttime visibility, and I think they look a lot better too. It makes it look a little closer to the Type R with those headlights. You also have those new body colored inserts there in the lower part of the front bumper. That's a new thing for 2020. And I just like the blacked out grille and the Si badge. It's all pretty tasteful, but still has a nice amount of aggression to it that I think looks really good. You also have these new 18-inch matte black wheels here for 2020, and this one has the high performance tire package, which means you get these Goodyear Eagle F1 tires that are 235 wide and are summer tires. You can still get an all-season tire option if you'd like, but these summer tires are only $200 extra and should give you a nice improvement in your handling, and so I think that's well worth choosing that option if you can get it. Otherwise though, you know, the coupe version of the Si here is you know, just same as any other Civic coupe that's been around for several years now. It's a good look, you know. I think as far as coupes go, again, not a whole lot to pick from these days, but I think it looks good, especially out back. I still love the dramatic taillights, and now here in 2020 everyone's doing these full width taillights, but the Civic was doing that again back in 2016, 2015 when these came out, and so I think it's a really cool look there, the way they kind of swoop around. And this one also has that rear spoiler that's a little bit higher and looks good. You also have the single exit exhaust there in the bottom, and overall I think it's a nice sporty appearance here for the Si Coupe. Fits in with, you know, what people that are looking for one of these, you know, is going to want, but it's not as over the top as the Type R, which I do appreciate the more subdued looks of the Si here. And so overall, especially in this rally red color, I think it really pops. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Civic Si has the same key as any other Honda, but it's a really great key. I love these new Honda keys. Just nice and small, has a nice weight to it, just a couple of buttons, and feels pretty high quality too. And so overall, I really like the key, but of course it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So just leave the key in your pocket, put it in the clutch, hit the engine start button, and it quietly starts right up. Also, if you're curious to hear about the interior in the 2020 Civic Si, my wife and I actually did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle, so you can go watch that. I'll link it above there. But overall, the Civic Si is a really nice interior, gives a good amount of stuff for the money, but I will say it is one of the nicest interiors in this segment. All right, so setting off here in the 2020 Honda Civic Si. Well, the first thing you'll notice, I think the first thing that I notice about these is the rev hang, and this one has a really high clutch engagement. And so the Civic Si's here are manual transmission only. There's never been an automatic available. There never will be, it seems, at least not right now. And so you got to make sure you're good with a manual. But even me, myself, I mean, I've been driving a manual for the past 14 years, and I still have trouble being smooth with this. And I will be living with this vehicle for a week, so I'm going to see, you know, how that gets better or worse during my week of driving. But, you know, I will say that, you know, it isn't too bad. You have a nice light clutch. The shifter is really pretty precise, so there's no complaints there. It's mostly just that this engine has rev hang built into the tune, and so that makes it a little tricky to be smooth with it. And then again, the clutch, at least in this one, is so high. I think the other Civic Si that I drove last fall, that didn't have a catch point that was this high, so I'm not sure what that deal is with this one. But anyway, so it's not the best manual transmission experience from that standpoint, but at least as far as the rev hang, I have read that you can fix that with a tune. So if that's the case, certainly would 100% recommend doing a light tune to this to at least get rid of that rev hang. I think it's something they did for fuel economy purposes, because it makes it a little bit easier, I guess, on the engine as far as fuel economy goes. But anyway, visibility is also spectacular here in the Civic Si. You do have a little speaker here right by the A-pillar, but you're sitting up high enough in the Civic Si that it doesn't really get in your way, and you have really good visibility, especially for a coupe. Nice large windows, very easy to see out of the back even, and no real blind spots because of all the glass. And so as far as coupes go, it's one of the easier ones to drive in that regard for sure. You of course have a backup camera. You also don't have normal blind spot monitoring, but you do have Honda's lane watch system, which has a camera that will pop up on the screen here whenever you put your right turn signal on, so you have that blind spot covered. But on the left here, you're going to have to still look over your shoulder. Would be nice for them to add blind spot monitoring in, at least as an option, since that's an option in basically everything else these days. But otherwise, the Civic Si is really nice. You have this adaptive suspension in these, and so with that, it doesn't do as big of a difference as it does in the Type R, but it still is going to be tuned for a fairly smooth ride either way. But it is a tiny bit stiffer in that sport mode, which we'll try out in a minute. But it's cruising quietly here. It's very refined. The Civic Si does have more refinement to it than the Veloster Turbo, which is going to be the main competitor I talk about here. But even stuff like the Forte GT and even the Jetta GLI, I think, is a little less refined than this, honestly. And so this is definitely one of the more refined options in this segment. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode here, and let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. Here we go. Chirps the wheels a little bit. Part of it is that rev hang. I'm trying to shift quickly, and you just can't rush the shifts with this rev hang. But once it does get up and moving, it is powerful and punchy. So we have a 1.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, which is tiny, but it still does 205 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 isn't amazing or anything. It's only 6.8 seconds. According to Motor Trend, that's what their testing provided. But actually, before the refresh here, it was about 6.6 to 6.5. So somewhere in the mid to high 6-second range is a safe bet. They did make it a little punchier here for 2020 because you now have a shorter final drive ratio. It's shorter by 6%. I think it's like 435 to 1 now. So it's a very minor change, but they did make it a little punchier. And it's been a couple of years since I drove a stock Civic Si before the 2020s here, but I will say that it feels pretty punchy, and it does seem like it likes hanging out the higher RPMs. Even fourth gear here, doing 45 miles an hour, I'm at 2750 RPM. So it really is punchy. And I noticed whenever I drove the sedan last fall on the highway in 6th, it is a little bit of a higher RPM on the highway there. And because of the shorter final drive, you actually get 2 mpg less for your EPA ratings for the fuel economy here in the 2020s. And I really respect Honda that they were willing to give up fuel economy numbers in order to make this feel a little punchier and a little more lively. And I think that's great. There's also this active sound enhancer that you now have here for 2020, which gets a little louder in sport mode to help amplify the sound, since you didn't have much sound before in this generation Si. And it sounds better. Like I said last year, it's in the right direction, but it still doesn't sound as good as the previous gen Civic Si. I still love those with their screamer of an engine, and just those were just so glorious to drive, and that still is my favorite Si. Full disclosure, I don't think this new version lives up to that as far as the engine and the powertrain goes, but the handling is certainly improved here in the SIs. And but here we're on a rough road now, and refinement is still pretty good. You hear a little more road noise, but it's not too bad. But anyway, we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how the Civic Si handles them here. So we got these summer tires, nice light weight, and pitching into a corner. Has a good amount of grip. It really is nice and flat and feels pretty playful. So one of the big things here is you have a limited slip differential here, and this is one of the few front-wheel drive competitors that has a limited slip diff. The Jetta GLI is the only one, and the Veloster N, which is a little more expensive, but it just feels so good in corners. And I complained in the fall how the steering was a little heavy, and compared to the Civic Sport hatch, that has lighter steering, and that really amplifies just how light these Civics are. This Si Coupe only weighs 2,889 pounds, so it really is light, but the steering still is a little heavier than I would like to. I would like it to be even lighter, just so it could amplify how quick you could really turn in here in the Si, because it really loves diving into corners. It's so flat, so grippy, and although Eagle F1 tires aren't my favorite summer tire, we have plenty of grip here. They're 235 wide all around, and really makes this a stout handle. This is the first time I've actually taken one of these new SIs down my own back roads, and it's very impressive. I honestly, it feels better now. Earlier, you know, the other sedan that I drove, it just felt a little heavier. This feels a little lighter. And the coupe is maybe a couple dozen pounds lighter tops. It's not a huge difference though, but I just have been really impressed with the handling, and it is so flat. It does such a good job, especially here in the sport mode. But we've caught up the traffic, but we'll try a couple corners here out of sport mode, and it definitely is a little softer feeling, and I can tell that. And you do also have a little bit of a lighter steering feel, I think, here in non-sport mode versus the sport mode, where it gets, I think, a little bit tighter with the electric power steering. But either way, it handles itself very, very well. But if you want that extra edge, put it in that sport mode, and then you're set. It really is a stout performer, and the limit slip differential, I think a lot of people do. That is a very important thing to have. And like I said, this and the Jetta GLI and the Veloster N are the only ones that offer that. And so that does give this an edge over the Veloster Turbo R-Spec, which I think, though, does feel a tiny bit better in corners, just because you're sitting a little bit lower. It feels even a little more lighter. Steering's a little lighter. All that stuff helps to really make the Veloster feel a little more like a go-kart. This doesn't feel like a go-kart. It just feels like a very good handling car. And there's nothing wrong with that. It still handles, like I said, very, very well. But it doesn't have the simplicity to the handling that the Veloster R-Spec does, because that, it doesn't have any kind of adaptive suspension. You have to go up to the Veloster N for all the adaptive stuff and the adjustability and everything. Yeah, and I think the shifter actually feels a little more mechanical in the Veloster R-Spec with its B&M short shifter. But this shifter does feel very good as well. No torque steer or anything either. There's some chirp from those tires again. And yeah, it really is good. And the more and more that I drive it, the more that I am getting used to the clutch. So that's not a big deal. It's mostly just the rev hang. Another thing to mention with the limited slip differential, if you live in a place that does get any kind of rain or snow, this will put down the power a lot better than all the stuff with open differentials, because with all the other ones, you hit some snow or something, you're going to have one tire spinning wildly and stuff, whereas with this, you'll actually have a better chance of driving in snow. And so yes, it's not going to be as good in bad weather as the all-wheel drive WRX that this competes with a little bit, but it still is going to give you, some pretty good grip. And yeah, I just wish it was a little easier to rev match the downshifts. The Type R, hands down, obviously that's way more expensive and not really even comparable to this, but the Type R really does have the better transmission. There isn't really any rev hang in that, and it feels better. It's easier to rev match, way easier to rev match. It also has auto rev matching if you don't want to do it yourself. So that's definitely still the best experience, but again, it is the top of the Civic range. But for way less money, we're talking 10, 11, 12 grand less for the SI. This is still so much fun around corners and is really a solid value on its own. Another thing I really like about the Civic Si, though, is you have a pretty good feeling throttle. It's got a little bit of a tip into it, but then it is pretty eager, especially in sport mode here, to really take off and go for it. You also have really good feeling brakes. These brakes actually feel better than the standard Civic brakes. Even the sport hatch brakes had a lot more travel to them. There's less travel with these SI brakes, and really, there's a very, very minor amount of tip in before you really start getting some nice grabby brakes here, and it feels really good, very confidence inspiring, and they feel very stout in corners whenever you're leaning on them as well. And so yeah, overall, it's just, like I said, a really great driving experience. But thanks to Honda, I will have the SI here for an entire week, so I'm going to drive around all week, and I'll come back and give you guys my real world fuel economy and any other impressions that I notice here during my week of driving, as well as my thoughts on the pricing and its competition. Alright, so I've been driving the SI for a week now, and I've really enjoyed it. So, it's really impressing me just how punchy this engine is. Off the line, it's not super punchy, but once you're in the higher gears and you stomp on it, especially with that 6% shorter ratio now for the final drive, that really gives the thing a lot more rip, I think. And I think that might alone be worth upgrading if you're in the market to upgrade your SI. Obviously, this isn't going to be as much fun as the old Civic Si with the old, screamer of an engine that it's had. That's still my favorite SI just because of that glorious engine. But if you have to, be buying a newer vehicle, I think this is great because you have still just so much power at any RPM here with the turbo. This thing has torque that old SI motor never could have hoped to have. You got so much punch, really at any RPM because of the shorter gearing, and then you have it all combined with this newer safety tech, which I really appreciate as well. Honda Sensing is now standard on the SI here for 2020 and gives you like the lane keep assist system, which I think is among some of the best lane keeping systems on the market today. You know, I was testing this on the highway a little bit, and just the amount of steering that it does for you is a lot more than like Toyota's system, which is a little more passive. And you know, this will actually keep you in your lane with basically you just keeping your hands on the wheel, versus the Toyota, it'll let you just go right off the road if you're not, like, you know, it'll warn you and it'll try and nudge you, but it doesn't do active steering as aggressively as this does. So I really like how hands-on their safety system is. But then again, if you don't want all that stuff helping you out, you can turn it all off and not be bothered. Do a little acceleration. Still not in love with that rev hang either. That's one thing that I still haven't been super smooth driving this all week, because it's trickier to get used to than the Type R that I just drove for a week, and other Hondas and stuff. I just wish, hopefully, like I said, a tune will fix that rev hang. You won't have that issue, but I would 100% do that tune to fix that, because that is something that still is a little annoying. So that is one thing, but otherwise, like I said, the safety systems are fantastic here in the SI, and if you do a lot of highway driving, that is another great reason to upgrade to the 2020 here for this great Honda sensing system. Another thing that really impressed me during my week with the SI was my fuel economy. So I ended up over about 115 miles of driving. I did a little bit of highway, but it was mostly suburban stop and go type driving. I've been managing to get 27.7 mpg, so almost 28, and that's pretty remarkable considering these are only rated at 26 in the city, and then they do 30 combined and 36 on the highway. So only a little bit of highway driving, and I'm still beating that city average by almost 2 mpg. And if you've watched any of my other reviews, generally in the course of a week, I'm getting 1 to 2 mpg less than the city rating on average. And so to be getting, you know, 2 mpg better than the city rating, and this really speaks to how efficient this engine is, and really makes me think that over the course of ownership with this vehicle, if you are doing more highway driving and stuff, you'll easily be getting into the 30s, no problem, and hitting that combined number easily, even with having fun and getting on this engine like I've been doing. And so I'm really impressed with the fuel economy, and so that's another perk of this 1.5 liter engine. It might not have tons of character and personality, but it's got strong turbo punch and it gets really good fuel economy. So two things that do really give this an advantage over the old SI, in addition to all the better safety and everything else. But yeah, really impressed with the fuel economy. The last thing to mention though is the pricing here of the Civic Si. So as tested, this one is $26,130, including the destination fee and everything, and so $200 extra for this HPT package, which gives you the summer tires, which I certainly think are worth an upgrade for only $200 more. Obviously, you could just do your own tire upgrade, but that's going to cost you more than $200 if you just left the all seasons on there. So I think it's a pretty good value to do that upgrade. And these, while these aren't the best summer tires ever, I think they're definitely going to be better than all seasons. And like I said, I didn't really have any issues with grip or anything. They were pretty good tires overall. But so about $26,000 for this as tested. And it's kind of interesting, with the positioning of this in the Honda lineup, because there are some other interesting options. For example, there's the Honda Civic Sport Hatch, which, although it has 20 less horsepower and like 15 less pound-feet of torque, that actually has an identical 0 to 60 time to this, which is kind of bizarre. You have more power. So in the real world, I think you will feel that the SI is faster than the Sport Hatch, but at least as far as 0 to 60 times go, they're the same. So power probably won't be a huge difference. And obviously, if you're looking at this video and you're interested in a coupe, this is really the only option, like I said, aside from the Veloster. So if you're into coupes, just go for one of these, you'll be happy, end of story. But if you are open to hatchbacks and sedans and things like that, there are some other options. And like I said, the Civic Sport Hatch, you can get one of those for about $2,000 less. You do lose out on the heated seats, the moonroof, and one or two other small things. And so, I think the LED headlights you also lose out on with the Sport Hatch for the base trim. So if you're okay living without those things, I think that could be a solid value that undercuts this a little bit, a little more practical with that hatch. And you still have those as a manual option. You can also get a CVT in those if you'd like, but the manual is really great in those. I did a quick drive video actually in a Sport Hatch and really enjoyed that as well. You can go watch that if you're curious. But so there's that as an option. You also, if you do want all those features, you can get the touring version of the Sport Hatch, which now also is available available with a manual transmission too, and with those you can get one of those has LED, has leather heated seats actually and everything, and those are about $3,000 more for that touring trim over this $26,000 SI. So 29 grand for that much power might be a little high for some people, but if you want all those luxuries, that is another option. Another interesting option to consider in the Honda lineup even is the Accord 1.5T Sport. So that uses the same engine, although it does 192 horsepower, so a little bit less than this, but you have the more practical, longer sedan shape with the Accord, and I love the way the Accord Sport handled on backwards. That 1.5T, it actually felt lighter in corners than this SI Coupe, believe it or not. That's just how it felt to me. You actually were sitting a little bit lower in the Accord, I think, as well. I just love the new Accords, and so if you want something a little more practical or something that has slightly more mature looks than the Civic here, the Accord is still a fantastic choice. Those also come in a manual transmission, and again, the Sport, you do lose out on a couple of things with that 1.5T Sport. You don't get heated seats, don't get a moonroof, so you lose a couple of things there. But if you're okay giving those up, those are, I think only about $1,000 difference between this and that, and certainly something to consider as well. And there are some people who might want to compare this to like a used Civic Type R, but comparing a used anything versus a new something is never a fair fight anyway, because you can get a used SI from this generation for way less and then undercut the Type R again. And the Type R is fantastic, but you're going to be paying higher insurance for a Type R most likely. It's not going to be as good on gas. You have some of those running costs that are going to be higher. I think, obviously the Type R is the top of the range, so hands down that is the more fun and exciting experience. But, again, you'd be buying a used vehicle, and if you're actually talking new versus new, there's like a $12,000 or $11,000 difference between this and the Type R. So not really comparable. Usually, if you're, looking for something at 26, you're not able to go up to nearly 40 grand for a Type R. So I think the SI is really in a solid niche here, and I like that they give you the LED headlights now, the Honda sensing, the heated seats, the moonroof, all those things for that $26,000 price tag. It is really impressive. Obviously, there are some other options. Like I said, you have the Veloster turbos you can get, which are going to have similar performance to this. You can also do some other options, like there's the Kia Forte GT if you're looking for a sedan. There's the Jetta GLI, and those are all pretty good. I really like the Forte GT, for example, but that does not have a limited slip differential. So with those, you're not going to have as good of poor weather traction, and also just putting power down coming out of corners on spirited drives. The SI is going to do that a lot better. And so I think that limited slip diff is really the key thing from this, because the Jetta GLI has it, but all the other competitors do not have that limited slip differential in their trims that are comparable to the SI here. So I think it does really help coming out of corners and stuff. If you don't drive at 9 or 10 tenths every day, you might not appreciate the limited slip diff as much, at least whenever you're on dry pavement. But that's just the only other thing to consider there, because you can get like a Forte GT fully loaded up with the dual clutch automatic. Actually, you can get one of those for like $24,500. Have leather heated and cooled seats, metal trim versus all the plastic you have in here, and it's those small little differences. But that is, I think, a little bit of a higher value proposition. If you're looking for something in this segment, the Jetta GLI can get really expensive, so that's kind of a little bit out there. But that is also another option if you're wanting to spend more money. So yeah, I think the Civic, might not be the best features per dollar, but I think as far as driving experience goes, having these digital gauges, which most of the competition doesn't have, having just the coupe option, which, like I said, very few even offer that anymore. I think I'm just really happy the Civic Si is still around, and I think it is still one of the best performance vehicles in this segment. Obviously, there are some other options if you're looking for stuff that's rear-wheel drive and all that kind of stuff. I can compare vehicles all day. This is a very hot segment, but I think the Civic Si still deserves its crown as one of the best in this segment, and I do really enjoy it. And honestly, the more time that I've spent with the Si, the more that I've enjoyed it, and it just gets better and better as time goes on. And so I think, for those of you considering buying one, I think if you do buy one, you will probably just continue to enjoy this for a long time to come, and it's just a really fun vehicle. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the Civic Si in the comments below. Huge thanks to Honda for providing me with the Civic Si to review for you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.